This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. First, the headlines. Kenya, floods, landslides kill 181 people, thousands forced to evacuate. Ashdod, Blinken says U.S. cannot support Israel without humanitarian plan. Beirut, Syrian man aid organization accused Russia of violation. Russia, ballistic missile strikes Ukrainian postal depot. United States, Republican presidential candidate Trump praises New York police. Australia, Queensland Parliament passes historic legalization to decriminalize sex work. Now the news in details. Floods and landslides across Kenya have killed 181 people since March, with hundreds of thousands forced to leave their homes, the government and Red Cross Society said on Wednesday, as dozens more were killed in neighboring Tanzania and Burundi. Torrential rain and floods have destroyed homes, roads, bridges and other infrastructure across the region. The toll in Kenya exceeds that from floods triggered by the El Nino weather phenomenon late last year. In the central Kenyan town of Mahiri, where at least 48 died in flash floods on Monday, 2 bodies were recovered from the debris on Wednesday, Kenya Red Cross South Regional Manager Felix Mayo said. Military personnel accompanied by sniper dogs had joined the search, Mayo said early on Wednesday. Government spokesperson Isaac Wara said the total death toll had risen by 10 to 179. Last year's rains followed the worst drought in large parts of East Africa in decades. In Kitengela, 33 kilometers from Nairobi, Kenya Red Cross workers were helping to rescue residents whose homes were marooned by floodwaters. They were also trying to rescue tourists trapped at camps in Narok, 215 kilometers from Nairobi, the Kenya Red Cross said on social media platform X. Kenya's National Highway Authorities said it had closed a section of a highway leading to the city and at least 3 other roads across the country due to flooding and debris. The disaster prompted Pope Francis to speak out in sympathy with Kenyans during a general audience on Wednesday at the Vatican. I wish to express to the people of Kenya my spiritual closeness at this time as severe flooding has tragically taken the lives of many of our brothers and sisters, injured others and caused widespread destruction, he said. The White House on Wednesday extended condolences to victims' families and said the United States is contributing to response efforts through the U.S. Agency for International Development. We continue to offer our continued and resolute support to all who have been impacted and are closely monitoring the situation, White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters at a briefing. Tank fire echoed from the Gaza Strip on Wednesday as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited an aid inspection point where he heard from Israeli officials, including Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, about efforts to increase assistance to the Palestinian enclave just a few hundred meters away. Blinken got his first up-close view of the Strip 6 months into the war as he toured a compound at the Kerem Shalom crossing bordered by thick concrete walls where aid trucks bound for Gaza are held for inspection, a process that aid groups have a complaint has been a major bottleneck. Sacks of canned chickpeas, rice, potatoes and toilet paper, some marked with the logo of the UN's World Food Programme or the World Central Kitchen. Aid groups sat on pallets waiting to enter Gaza. Soldiers carrying automatic weapons roamed around the area known as an inspection cell. Israel has sought to demonstrate it is not blocking aid to Gaza, especially since President Joe Biden issued a stark warning to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying Washington's policy could shift if Israel fails to take steps to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering and the safety of aid workers. That move came after 7 WCK aid workers were killed by an Israeli strike, increasing anger over the dire conditions for Palestinians in Gaza. U.S. officials and some groups and aid groups says some progress has been made, but warned it is insufficient amid stark warnings of imminent famine along Gaza's 2.3 million people. The war began when Palestinian Hamas militants attacked Israel on October 7, killing 1,200 people and abducting 253 others, according to Israeli tallies. In response, Israel has launched a relentless assault on Gaza, killing more than 34,000 Palestinians, local health authorities say, in a bombardment that has reduced the enclave to a wasteland. The Kerem Shalom crossing was closed after October 7, when Israel imposed a strict blockade on Gaza but reopened to limited traffic in December, as well as the crossings at Kerem Shalom and nearby Rafah on the border with Egypt. Israel has recently said it is opening crossings into northern Gaza to aid trucks. Israel's state auditor on Wednesday called on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the head of the armed forces to cooperate with an official investigation into how Hamas was able to stage the October 7 attack on Israel that sparked the Gaza war. State Comptroller Netanyahu Engman said that in the early days of the war that he intended to investigate the events around the October 7 attack, the deadliest single day in the country's 75-year history. In December, he said his office would leave no stone unturned as it looks into the multi-system failures leading up to, during, and after the October 7, and that most of his office's audit plans for 2024 would focus on the probe. After more than 6 months of war, the citizens of Israel are entitled to answers regarding all those responsible for the failure, and the state's comptroller is determined to provide them. Engelman wrote in letters to Netanyahu and Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi, according to a Facebook post by his office. The Prime Minister's office rejected Engelman's accusations and said it was fully cooperating with the Comptroller's office, adding that it had learned about the Comptroller's letters from media reports. All requests were answered in full, including every question concerning the Prime Minister, even though the teams of the Prime Minister's office have been working around the clock on war issues, the statement from the office said. Israel's Cannes public broadcaster reported that in his letters, the State Comptroller said the Prime Minister's office and the Security Cabinet were not fully cooperating with his office, leading to delays in the audit. The report said the National Security Council had restricted access to documents written up to 2 years before the outbreak of the war. Hamas gunmen broke through a heavily fortified Israeli security fence around Gaza to attack southern Israeli military bases and towns on October 7, killing 1,200 people and taking some 250 hostage, according to Israeli tallies. Israel has killed more than 34,000 people in the unrelenting assault on the densely populated Gaza Strip it has mounted in the 7 months since Gaza authorities have said. The campaign has displaced most of the Palestinian territory's 2.3 million population and laid much of the narrow area to waste, exacerbating a humanitarian crisis that Palestinians in Gaza were already facing under a 16-year blockade. Netanyahu says that he will not end it until Hamas is into conflict. Last October, when Hamas attacked southern Israel, it has largely focused on efforts to improve humanitarian conditions in Gaza. Blinken spoke at Israel's main port, Ashdod, and praised meaningful progress in recent weeks on humanitarian access, including by allowing flour for Gaza to flow through the port, as well as by opening up new border crossings. The progress is real, but given the immense need in Gaza, it needs to be accelerated, it needs to be sustained, he said. Blinken said Israel's government to take a set of specific steps to facilitate aid to Gaza, where nearly half of the population is suffering catastrophic hunger, he said. The United States is Israel's main diplomatic supporter and weapons supplier. Blinken's visit comes appeal, but said Israel was the real obstacle. Blinken's comments contradict reality, Sami Abuzuri told reporters. Israel is holding off sending a delegation to Cairo for follow-up truce talks, pending a response from Hamas's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, an Israeli official said. A Syrian man and an aid organization have accused Russia of violating international law by deliberately bombing a hospital in northern Syria in 2019 in a new complaint filed at the United Nations Human Rights Committee this week. Russia, which intervened military in Syria's conflict in 2015 to bolster the forces of its ally, President Bashar al-Assad, has been accused by UN investigators of committing war crimes in Syria but has not faced any international tribunal. Moscow has repeatedly denied accusations that it violated international law in Syria. The new complaint, filed on May 1st but made public on Thursday, accuses Russia's Air Force of killing 2 civilians in a series of airstrikes on the Kafr Surgical Hospital in the northwest province of Idlib. On May 15, 2019. It was brought to the committee by the cousin of those killed and by Hand in Hand for Aid and Development, an aid group that was supporting the hospital, which was in territory held by armed groups opposed to Assad. The complaint relies on videos, eyewitness statements, and audio recordings, including correspondence between a Russian pilot and ground control about dropping munitions. Syrians are looking to the Human Rights Committee to show us some measure of redress by acknowledging the truth of this brutal attack and the suffering caused, said Fadi al-Dairi, the director of Hand in Hand. The Geneva-based Human Rights Committee is a body of independent experts that monitor the status of political and civil rights around the world and can receive complaints by states and individuals on alleged violations. Individual complaints can lead to compensation payments, investigations, or other measures. While rights groups have accused both Syria and Russia of violating international law within Syria for years, neither country is party to the International Criminal Court's Rome Statute, and opportunities for accountability are rare. Russia signed on to the optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in 1991, meaning it accepts the Human Rights Committee's ability to consider complaints from individuals against it. This complaint before a preeminent international human rights tribunal exposes the Russian government and armed forces' deliberate strategy of targeting healthcare in clear violation of the laws of war, said James A. Goldstein, executive director of the Justice Initiative, whose lawyers are representing the applicants. In 2019, the UN Human Rights Commission, a separate body, said strikes on medical facilities in Syria, including the Kafr Hospital, strongly suggested that government-affiliated forces conducting these strikes are at least partly, if not wholly, deliberately striking health facilities. Turkish police detained 217 people on Wednesday, Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya said, after tear gas and rubber bullets were used to stop the protesters reaching Taksim Square, the traditional focal point of May Day rallies in Istanbul. President Tayyip Erdogan said on the eve of May Day that the annual protest would not be allowed to take place on Taksim Square, which was cordoned off by police. Legal experts say this stance violates the right of Turks to organize public meetings and demonstrations, a right upheld by the Constitutional Court in a ruling last October. The leader of Turkey's main opposition, Republican People's Party, Özgür Özel, called for the rally to go ahead in the square, despite a ban issued by the Istanbul's governor's office. If May 1st is not celebrated in the country's main square, democracy is in trouble. This struggle will continue until Taksim is free, Özel told reporters on Wednesday in the district of StarTimes. Özel and Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, who was re-elected this year on a CHP ticket, then joined workers and labor union members for the march towards Taksim Square nearby to protest against soaring inflation and economic hardships. However, the May Day organizing committee shortly afterwards announced that the end of the demonstration in Sarıçayn following the police intervention, drawing angry jeers from the crowd, a video posted on X showed. Authorities had deployed snipers on the historic Valens aqueduct in Sarıçayn and created a barricade with water cannon vehicles and dozens of police officers blocking all routes to the square. Some protesters threw stones at security forces as they tried to breach the barricades. Yerlikaya said more than 42,000 police officers had been drafted in Istanbul for the demonstrations held every year to mark International Labour Day. Protests are often centered on Taksim Square, where 34 people were killed during demonstrations on May 1st, 1977. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said on Wednesday that Turkey would join in South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Upon completion of the legal text of our work, we will submit the declaration of official intervention before the ICJ with the objective of implementing this political decision, Fidan said in a joint press conference with Indonesia's Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi in Ankara. Turkey will continue to support the Palestinian people in all circumstances, he said. The ICJ ordered Israel in January to refrain from any acts that could fall under the Genocide Convention and to ensure its troops commit on no genocidal acts against Palestinians after South Africa accused Israel of state-led genocide in Gaza. In January, President Tayyip Erdogan said that Turkey was providing documents for the case as the ICJ, also known as the World Court. Israel and its Western allies described the allegation as baseless. A final ruling in South Africa's ICJ's case in The Hague could take years. The Philippines summoned a Chinese diplomat on Thursday to protest Beijing's use of water cannons against Filipino vessels at a disputed shoal in the South China Sea, describing it as harassment and dangerous maneuvers. Its foreign ministry said the deputy chief of missions was summoned to hear the 20th protest made by the Philippines against China this year, one of the 153 under the current administration over the conduct of its Coast Guard and fishing vessels that Manila maintains are militia. The Philippines protested the harassment, ramming, swarming, shadowing and blocking dangerous maneuvers, use of water cannons and other aggressive actions of China Coast Guard and Chinese maritime militia. It said in a statement urging the boats to leave the waters immediately. The Philippines has accused China of elevating tensions in the South China Sea after its Coast Guard used water cannon and damaged 2 of its vessels while en route to the Scarborough Shoal on Tuesday to assist Filipino fishermen. The shoal, which has been occupied by China for more than a decade, has been a flashpoint between the Philippines and China on and off for years. Tensions have escalated there recently as the Philippines take a more assertive approach in disputed areas while strengthening alliances with the United States and Japan. A prime fishing patch used by several countries and close to major shipping lanes, the shoal falls inside the Philippines' exclusive economic zone and is claimed by China, though no country has sovereignty over it. China's embassy in Manila on Wednesday said the atoll had always been China's territory and urged the Philippines to cease infringements and provocations and not challenge China's resolve to defend our sovereignty. China claims sovereignty over much of the South China Sea, a conduit for more than $3 trillion of annual shipborne commerce, including parts claimed by the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia and Brunei. An international tribunal in 2016 said China's expansive claim had no legal basis, a decision Beijing has rejected. South Korea's National Assembly voted on Thursday to approve a bill backed by the ruling and opposition parties to launch a fresh probe into the deadly Halloween crowd crush in the capital Seoul in 2022. An earlier bill, which was backed by the opposition-led parliament without the support of the ruling People's Power Party, was vetoed by President Yoon Suk-yeol in January. The latest bill is a compromise that removes granting full investigative power to the panel, which Yoon had objected to, according to his office. Under the bill, a committee made up of members recommended by 2 major parties and a chair chosen by them through consultations will look into the tragedy. The passage of the bill comes after Yoon met opposition leader Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party for talks on Monday following the PPP's crushing general election defeat last month. It also comes amid growing pressure on authorities, including from relatives of the victims, to hold those responsible to account. A spokesperson for Yoon on Wednesday welcomed turn to cooperation in politics. The Halloween crowd crush in Seoul's Itaewon district in 2022 killed nearly 160 people, and relatives of the victims, as well as the United Nations Human Rights Committee, have since called for an independent inquiry. A police investigation published early last year concluded that a lack of preparation and an inadequate response were the main factors behind the deadly crash. In January, South Korean prosecutors indicted the former head of the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency, charging him with contributing through negligence to the crash. No senior government figures, including the Interior and Safety Minister, have resigned or been sacked so far over the crash. A collapse of an expressway section in China's Guangdong province caused vehicles to plunge and killed 36 people while injuring another 30, state media reported on Thursday, as millions in the country travel for the May Day holiday break. The collapse, triggered by heavy rain, occurred around 2:10 a.m. on Wednesday on the Mezhao-Dabu Expressway, Xinhua news agency reported, adding that the collapsed section was 17.9 meters in length and caused 23 vehicles to plunge. Mezhao is one of the areas in southern China's Guangdong that has been badly hit by heavy rain and hail since late April, which sets off dangerous mudslides, inundated homes and destroyed bridges. President Xi Jinping called for the utmost efforts to save lives and eliminate dangers as the rainy weather continued in the region, according to a Xinhua report. Task force from the central and local governments have been dispatched for the rescue work, the report added. It will be hard for Taiwan to attend this year's World Health Organization Annual Assembly, and it hopes more countries will support its presence, the island's foreign minister said on Thursday after the United States pressed for an invite. Taiwan is excluded from most international organizations because of objection to the World Health Assembly as an observer from 2009 to 2016 under the administration of then-President Ma Ying-jeou, who signed landmark trade and tourism agreements with China, but Beijing began blocking Taiwan's participation in 2017 after President Tsai Ing-wen won office. Speaking to reporters in Parliament, Taiwan Foreign Minister Joseph Wu noted a Wednesday statement from U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, which he said the United States strongly encourages the WHO to reinstate Taiwan's invitation. When it comes to attending this year's more countries to support us, Wu said without elaborating on those problems. This year's WHA starts May 27, just a week after Taiwan President-elect Lai Ching-te takes office. China has a strong dislike of Lai, who it believes is a dangerous separatist and has rebuffed his repeated calls for talks. Taiwan, which is allowed to attend some technical WHO meetings, says its exclusion hindered efforts to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. Blinken's statement said the United States commended the WHO for taking steps to engage Taiwan more meaningfully in its technical work over the past year and for improving lines of communication. Yet Taiwan's continued exclusion from this preeminent global health forum undermines inclusive global public health, inviting Taiwan to observe the WHO is what is a critical importance of affirming the WHO's goal of health for all. Neither China's foreign ministry nor the WHO immediately responded to a request for comment. China has in recent years ramped up diplomatic and military pressure against Taiwan to force the island to accept China's sovereignty. Taiwan's government rejects China's claims and says only the island's 23 million people can decide their future, and that Beijing has no right to speak for or represent Taiwan on the international stage. Hundreds of residents of Indonesia's Tagulandang Island were waiting at the island's port to be evacuated on Wednesday, footage from National Search and Rescue Agency showed, while grey smoke continued to erupt from Rang's volcano. Indonesia's Rang volcano erupted on Tuesday, spewing lava that prompted authorities to evacuate more than 12,000 people from the nearby Tagulandang Island. The Center for Volcanology and Geological Hazard Mitigation raised the alert status of Rang to the highest level after yesterday's eruption and warned the residents of Tagulandang Island that a tsunami could be triggered by volcanic material collapsing into the ocean. Personnel of Manado's Search and Rescue Agency are evacuating 109 Tagulandang residents to Monte Port, while hundreds are still waiting in Minanga Port to be evacuated. the National Search and Rescue Agency said in a statement on Wednesday. The residents will be evacuated to North Minahasa Regency on Indonesia's Sulawesi Island. Transport authorities extended Manado's Sam Ratulangi Airport shutdown until noon on Thursday. Meanwhile, carrier Air Asia said in an Instagram post on Wednesday that flights to and from several cities in Malaysia's Borneo were affected by the eruption. Rang Island is about 100 kilometers from Manado, the capital of North Sulawesi province in the north-central region of the sprawling Indonesia archipelago. Indonesia straddles the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire, an area of high seismic activity where multiple tectonic plates meet. You are watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We return after this break.
From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on-spot news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economic, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings on The Fact Today, only on ATN.
People into the country illegally. That is amazing.
Honorable
You human trafficker.
Honorable they are not picking our calls. They made up their minds.
So no agreement with the EU, but
Every day, our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics.
Nobody's ambition is what's the blood.
I have fought.
I belong to everybody, and I belong to nobody.
ATN covers it all on ATN.
beyond the line, across the ocean, to the land beyond the mountains. Through the Sahara, we bring on-the-spot news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Fact today, only on 18.
Welcome back. This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. Now the rest of our stories. A Russian ballistic missile struck a postal depot in the Ukrainian port of Odessa late on Wednesday, injuring 14 people and triggering a large fire, Regional Governor Oleg Keeper said. It was the third missile attack on the city in as many days. Keeper, writing on the Telegram messaging app, said one of the injured required hospital treatment. The head of the Nova Pochta Postal and Courier Company, Volodymyr Pepereshnok, said on Facebook that all 18 employees on duty had made their way safely to a bomb shelter before the missile hit a loading section of the depot. Pictures and video posted online showed flames and billowing clouds of smoke engulfing buildings and firefighters straining their hoses on areas still ablaze. Most of the loading area appeared to have been reduced to a shell. One Odessa media outlet posted a video it said showed the moment of impact with debris flying inside the facility. Russia denies targeting civilian sites. Odessa is a frequent target of Russian attacks, and missiles have hit sites in the city over the past 2 days, killing 8 people. Many of the attacks since Russia launched its invasion in February 2022 have singled out the city's port infrastructure. Western tanks and military hardware captured by Russian forces in Ukraine went on display in Moscow on Wednesday at an exhibition at the Russian military said showed Western help would not stop it winning the war. Long queues of people formed on what was a sunny May Day public holiday at the entrance to the exhibition entitled Trophies of the Russian Army, which is being held outside a museum celebrating the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in 1945. History is repeating itself, the Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement, adding that the Soviet Union had in 1943 also put on a display of captured tanks and hardware, in this case from the German army. Strength is in the truth. It has always been that way in 1943 and today. These war trophies reflect our strength. The more of them there are, the stronger we are, the ministry stated, predicting a Russian victory in what it officially calls its special military operation in Ukraine. No Western military equipment will change the situation on the battlefield, the statement said. According to Western and Ukrainian critics, much of Russia's military hardware is old or outdated, and Russian battlefields battlefield gains have resulted from sheer force of numbers and high casualties. Both sides keep the number of dead and injured a secret, but are known to have suffered heavy losses. The Moscow display, which includes US, German and French tanks supplied to Ukraine, came days after the US approved a $61 billion aid package for Kyiv, and after Russia made some swift but incremental territorial gains in eastern Ukraine at a time when Kyiv's forces say they lack ammo and manpower. Ukraine, whose President Volodymyr Zelensky says it will eventually push Russian forces from its soil, held a similar exhibition along Kyiv's Central Boulevard last summer, featuring burnt-out husks of Russian tanks and kamikaze drones. Clambering over the Abrams holding his microphone, a correspondent told Russians that the tank had been built in the United States as an indestructible wonder weapon, but that was all nonsense. Look at this, all of its reputation has been destroyed, he said. The Swiss government said on Thursday that Russia has not been invited at this stage to talks to be held in Switzerland in mid-June aimed at helping bring about peace in the conflict between Moscow and Ukraine. Switzerland is convinced that Russia must be involved in this process, the Swiss government said in a statement. A peace process without Russia is not possible. Hundreds of helmeted police descended onto the campus of the University of California at Los Angeles after darkness fell on Wednesday, preparing to clear out a pro-Palestinian protest camp attacked the previous night by pro-Israel supporters. The impending crackdown at UCLA is the latest flashpoint for mounting tensions on U.S. college campuses, where protests over Israel's conduct of the war in Gaza have led to student clashes with each other, school administrators, and law enforcement. Starting around sunset, officers in tactical gear began filing onto the UCLA campus adjacent to a complex of tents occupied by throngs of demonstrators. Some protesters were seen donning hard hats, goggles, and respirator masks in anticipation of the raid a day after the university declared the encampment unlawful. Hundreds of other pro-Palestinian activists who assembled outside the tent city jeered police with shouts of shame on you, with some banging on drums and waving Palestinian flags as officers marched onto the campus grounds. The demonstrators, many wearing the traditional Palestinian keffiyeh scarves, also chanted, "Disclose, divest, we will not stop, we will not rest, and free, free Palestine." A much smaller group of demonstrators waving Israeli flags urged on the police to shut down the encampment, yelling, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, the occupation has got to go." But police are awaiting word from commanders to remove barricades and march into the encampment to arrest occupants who refuse to leave. Prior to a beautiful thing to watch New York police officers raiding a Columbia University building occupied by pro-Palestinian students and called on officials to crack down on campus protests across the United States. New York was under siege last night, Trump told supporters at a campaign rally in Wisconsin, praising the police officers for arresting about 300 protesters at Columbia and City College of New York, who he referred to as raging. Although some Jewish students have said they feel unsafe on campus and unnerved by chants they say are anti-Semitic. "I say remove the encampments immediately, vanquish the radicals, and take back our campuses for all of the normal students who want a safe place from which to learn," Trump said. The October 7 attack on southern Israel by Hamas militants from the Gaza Strip and the ensuing Israeli offensive on the Palestinian enclave have unleashed the biggest outpouring of U.S. student activism since anti-racism protests in 2020. The police response at Columbia has triggered condemnations from some Columbia faculty. Last week, the Columbia University Senate approved a resolution saying the school's administration had undermined academic freedom and disregarded the rights of students and faculty by calling in the police and shutting down protests. Trump sought to pin the blame for the turmoil on Democratic President Joe Biden, whose aides have condemned physical intimidation and anti-Semitism whilst speaking out in support of peaceful protests, which have advocated for humanitarian aid in Gaza and the university divestment from companies supporting the Israeli military. Trump also criticized a possible move by the Biden administration, outlined by U.S. White House Press Secretary on Wednesday, to relocate some Palestinian refugees who are related to Americans to the U.S. During his presidency, Trump pursued a hard line on immigration. At times, he has used dehumanizing terminology to describe refugees and immigrants in the courts illegally, rhetoric that his critics say is aimed at generating fear and energizing his political base. Queensland Parliament has passed historic legislation decriminalizing sex work in the state after decades of campaigning, but advocates are concerned the hard-won reform could be overturned if the Liberal National Opposition wins government in October. The party voted against the bill on Thursday evening. One Nation and Carter's Australian Party MPs also voted against the legislation. The Attorney General, Eva Diaz, who sponsored the bill, told Parliament that discrimination and stigma were common because about 90% of sex workers were forced to operate outside the law. A parliamentary committee heard that people in the industry suffer from unwanted advances and aggression from clients. Others have described facing discrimination and stigma as a result of their job. These experiences are felt across the sex work industry, he said. Prior to the reforms, sex workers were permitted to operate in Queensland either as a sole trader in a brothel, There were fewer than 24 licensed brothels in the entire state. Scores of sex workers watched on as Labour Greens and independent members voted to pass the bill. The sex worker and Respect INC state coordinator Lulu Holiday said it had been stressful and at times traumatic working under the state's regulatory system, though she has avoided any criminal punishment. However, I do know many people that have been criminalized, have had multiple charges against them, have been threatened with deportation, been absolutely harassed and abused by police under these laws, she said. The new law regulates sex work the same way as all other businesses, imposing planning and workplace health and safety and other rules. The Shadow Attorney General Tim Nichols said it was unclear how the world's oldest profession would be regulated from a planning perspective, raising concerns it could prove a nuisance to neighbors. While the intention might be to treat sex work businesses just like any other, the reality is a Nordic model which prohibits sex work but only punishes the client, not the employee. The opposition MP Mark Robinson described the Nordic model as the best practice, telling Parliament that it is only a matter of time that more effective laws will be passed across Australia. The Labour MP Chris Whitten said nowhere else in Australia is going down that path. And the Australian Christian Lobby had pushed it in the parliamentary committee inquiring into the bill which he chaired. The Queensland Council of Unions General Secretary Jacqueline King said the LNP would face the United Union movement along with the sex work industry if they choose to campaign to once again criminalize the industry. This is about actually ensuring equal health and safety rights, equal industrial rights for sex workers, she said. The sex worker and Scarlet Alliance with blackmail as they investigate a major breach that saw personal details for up to 1 million New South Wales and ACT residents shared online. NSW police officers have been working with state, federal and international agencies as they investigate the major breach that is believed to be either blackmail or corporate sabotage after data was published this week. Personal data, including names and addresses, were accessed as part of the incident involving OutterBox, an IT provider used by dozens of hospitality venues, including hospitality giant Maryville. Police are investigating whether a website may have been set up by the alleged perpetrator. It purported to allow people to search names in the leaked database and returned redacted information about its content. It claimed that it contained 1,050,169 records. Officers from the NSW Police State Crime Command's Cybercrime Squad were investigating under Strike Force Division. On Thursday evening, police announced they had arrested a man after executing a search warrant in Fairfield West about 4:20 p.m. At the address, police arrested a 46-year-old man. He will be taken to Fairfield Police Station,